Hello, my dear Minnow students. What a difference a real education can make when it comes to managing your menopause. Actually, a real education can make a difference when it comes to anything. That's why I'm an eternal student. The process of learning is never ending. And the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. So this is video number 360. It's part of our unit on breast cancer, which began in video 356. Thus far, you've learned about basic breast anatomy, how that anatomy changes as you age, the 4 breast hormones that create those changes, dense breasts, and fibrocystic breasts. This means that everything you've learned thus far is about normal breasts. And today we will begin our lessons on abnormal breasts. So this tutorial is on benign breast diseases. I think it's so critical to your learning to first always address what's normal and then what's abnormal. Otherwise, you make assumptions about abnormal things that are entirely incorrect. Now, you will not find this material on benign breast diseases in my book, even though all of chapter 30 is on breast cancer in both editions, first and second. If you've ever written a book, you know that you can rarely cover everything. And since the chapter in the book is on breast cancer, I dive right into cancer without covering these benign breast diseases. So when I said that this video was on benign breast diseases, what came to mind for you? Do you know of any benign breast diseases? If so, what do you know about them? Most women are clueless. Not only do they have no knowledge of any benign breast diseases, they also tend to label some normal breast characteristics as abnormal and call them diseases when they aren't. Such is the case with fibrocystic breasts, as you discovered last week. So today I'm going to ensure that you know what constitutes the benign breast diseases. And just to get you thinking, let's start with a quiz question. Which of the following is not a benign breast disease? A, breast adenoma. B, breast fibroadenoma. C, intraductal papilloma. D, atypical ductal hyperplasia. E, atypical lobular hyperplasia. F, lobular carcinoma in situ, or LCIS. G, all of the above are benign breast diseases. H, none of the above are benign breast diseases. I, all except option F, which is LCIS, lobular carcinoma in situ, above, are benign breast diseases. Do you recognize any of those entities? Do you know what determines whether a breast condition is benign or not? Did you recognize some terms I've taught you in the preceding videos on cancers? This is the essence of a true education. You use what you already know to figure out what you don't know, and that's what we'll be doing today. So now I'll show you the answer, and then I'll briefly explain each one of these entities. The goal is to understand what makes a breast condition benign rather than malignant. So here's the answer. All of the above are benign breast diseases. Now I know that some of you are gasping with surprise at that answer. And this is precisely why you need a true education rather than a bunch of sound bites. So let's address why these are benign and what makes them benign. So what does the word benign mean? Most people associate the word benign with cancers. Alternatively, they use it to mean pre-cancers. But the word benign is really the opposite of the word malignant. Most people commonly use the words benign and malignant in the context of tumors. A tumor is any collection of cells that forms a swelling or a lump. Some collections of cells that form tumors consist entirely of normal cells. Some collections of cells that form tumors consist entirely of abnormal cells. And some collections of cells that form tumors consist of both normal and abnormal cells. Anytime you see a word that ends with the suffix oma, it means that it is a tumor. In other words, words ending in oma are tumors that can be either benign or malignant. So the word tumor does not mean cancer. Some tumors are malignant and others are benign. But the problem really lies in the assumption that all tumors are cancers. They aren't. The word tumor only refers to the fact that there is a collection of cells. They may be a collection of completely normal cells, in which case neither the word benign nor the word malignant would apply. So separate the word benign from the word cancer, and separate the word tumor from the word cancer. They do not automatically belong together. Of course, you can have a tumor that is a benign cancer, meaning it has not spread and invaded other organs. But the word benign all by itself means the disease or tumor is confined to the organ of origin. It has well-defined borders between the tumor and the surrounding tissue. It is slow-growing, and it is treatable with surgery alone. So all of the entities we discussed today are benign. The most important factor of any benign disease is that it does not spread or invade surrounding tissues. Many benign diseases have a malignant version of the disease too. And the word malignant, all by itself, means that the disease or tumor is not confined to the organ of origin, or it does not have well-defined borders between the tumor and the surrounding tissue. It is not slow-growing, and it is not treatable with surgery alone. Malignancy changes everything, so be careful to honor and acknowledge the difference between a benign and a malignant disease. They are usually as different as night and day. Now, before we address these entities individually, we're going to categorize them. I love categorizing things. A category groups similar things together in a way that helps you understand them. Here, we'll be using some of the terms I've taught you in previous cancer videos. So don't expect to get the same detail on these terms here that I have already given you. This is why you just have to watch my videos in order. For our organizational scheme today, we'll divide benign breast diseases into 3 categories. Proliferative diseases without atypia, proliferative diseases with atypia, and in situ diseases. To make sense of these terms, you first need to know the definitions of these terms. So let's review the definitions of the words used in this organizational scheme and realize that these should not be completely new to you if you're watching these videos in order. The first word is proliferative. The word proliferative comes from the word proliferate. Proliferative means growing or increasing in number. So any breast disease that is proliferative means that it grows. The word atypia comes from the word atypical. Atypical means that something is different from the normal version of that same thing. If a person behaves in a way that is atypical, it means that he or she is behaving differently than they normally do. When it comes to your breasts, or anything in medicine, we use the word atypia as the noun form of the word atypical. So atypia refers to breast cells that look unusual or different from normal breast cells. And our next term is in situ. In situ means local or in its original location. In other words, it's localized to one particular place and has not spread. So our three terms of importance to benign breast diseases are proliferative, atypia or atypical, and in situ. So with that as our foundation, let's address each of the benign breast diseases individually. And I'll preface this whole thing by telling you from the start that none of these is caused by the so-called estrogen dominance. How I wish that ridiculous term had never been coined. As I've explained in previous videos, it isn't even something known in the medical world. It's a marketing term designed to scare women away from estrogen and induce them to buy progesterone. So please, please erase it from your vocabulary. Okay, now for our topic. The first thing we need to do is to distinguish the difference between our three categories of benign diseases depicted by our three terms, proliferative, atypical, and in situ. To do so, I'm going to use our familiar prop here that you've seen in many, many, many previous videos. So the first category is proliferative diseases without atypia. So that would correspond to hyperplasia here. Proliferative means an overgrowth of cells. Both those cells are completely normal. The second category is proliferative diseases with atypia. That would correspond to atypical hyperplasia here and dysplasia here. The cells are overgrown, but they are also disorganized, but not so disorganized as to be cancer cells. The third category is in situ diseases. Now this one's a tricky one. This one describes the location of the cells rather than describing their characteristics. All it means is that the cells are still in their location of origin. There is no indication as to how normal or abnormal those cells are. They may exhibit dysplasia or they may exhibit neoplasia. But no matter how odd the cells look, they haven't gone anywhere. And because they haven't gone anywhere, they cannot be cancer. So I'll add that to our board and explain that this includes the dysplasia row and the neoplasia row. So with that, let's delve into the actual benign breast diseases. Our first category consists of proliferative diseases without atypia. So this means it's a category of breast diseases that grow, which is designated by the word proliferative. And that's all they do. They just produce too many cells. So in the unit on cancer in general, you learn that there's a word when there are too many cells. The word is hyperplasia. Hyperplasia means an increase in cell number or in the number of cell layers. Here it is on our demonstration board, right there. Hyperplasia means that there are more cells than usual. It says nothing about how normal they are. So all the benign breast diseases in this first category are simply circumstances that involve too many normal cells. So let's put this label here indicating that hyperplasia corresponds to proliferative diseases without atypia. And our first disease in this category is breast adenoma. Now, where else have you heard the word adenoma or something that sounds similar? You heard part of it over and over again in our unit on endometrial uterine cancer. You learned that endometrial uterine cancer is an adenomatous cancer. But an adenomatous cancer is called an adenocarcinoma. And you learned that an adenomatous cancer is a cancer of the glandular cells. In other words, it's a cancer that begins when a normal glandular cell transforms into a cancerous glandular cell. But our word for today does not include the word carcinoma. It's just the word adenoma. Well, the prefix adeno means gland, and the suffix oma means tumor. So, a breast adenoma is a glandular cell tumor that is benign. Because it's a proliferative disease, it grows. But it is not cancer, and it is not malignant. And adenoma applies to the gland. So the gland is this part here. So this is a situation in which the cells in the glandular portion of your breast multiply. Breast adenomas are usually solid tumors found when you feel them on your self-breast exam, or your physician feels them on clinical breast exam, or they show up on a mammogram or ultrasound. And usually you confirm the fact that they're benign by biopsy, and then treatment is simple excision. Next we have breast fibroadenoma. Now this is a combination of two words you've heard before. Fibroids are the solid benign tumors that are so common in the uterus, and they are present in about 40 to 50% of women. Fibroids consist of fibrous tissue. And you've learned in this breast cancer unit that the fibrous tissue in your breast is the tissue that makes them dense, firm, and perky. And then the prefix adeno means gland again. So a breast fibroadenoma is a tumor composed of both fibrous and glandular cells. And once again, it's proliferative, so it grows. But because it's a benign breast disease, it is not malignant. It isn't cancer. So like breast adenomas, these are solid tumors. And like breast adenomas, they are found when you feel them on self-breast exam, or your physician feels them on clinical breast exam, or they show up on a mammogram or ultrasound. Also like breast adenomas, you confirm the fact that they're benign by biopsy, and then treatment is simple. So adenomas and fibroadenomas are very, very similar. The only difference being that fibroadenomas include fibrous tissue and adenomas do not. Our next benign breast disease is one you've probably never heard of before. It has a really odd name. It's a benign phyllodes tumor. It has an odd spelling too. It's pronounced phyllodes, but instead of ending in IES or EES or even EYS, it ends in ES. This is another solid tumor that presents somewhat like a fibroadenoma, and there is a malignant variety of it also. Our next benign breast disease is something called intraductal papilloma. Now don't let big, crazy sounding words baffle you. Just break them down into their component parts to figure out what they mean. Intra means inside. So this is a disease located inside of something, but what? Ductal means duct. And in the very first video of this unit, you learned that your breast is made up of structures that look like broccoli. And the broccoli stalk consists of two parts. The floral head, which is like the lobules of your breast, the glands, and the stem, which is like the ducts of your breast. So intraductal papilloma is a benign breast disease located in the ducts of your breast tissue. So that explains the word intraductal. Now for the word papilloma. The word papilloma just means that the tumor grows in a pattern that forms finger-like projections. So papilloma is a descriptive word for the growth pattern. An intraductal papilloma is a benign breast disease that consists of a benign tumor growing in your breast ducts in a finger-like pattern. So that does it for our first category of benign breast diseases, which are the proliferative diseases without atypia. They are breast adenomas, breast fibroadenomas, benign phylloides tumor, and intraductal papilloma. The second category consists of proliferative diseases with atypia. So this means it's a category of breast diseases that grow, which is designated by the word proliferative, and they have cells that look unusual, which is designated by the word atypia. And this category also consists of breast hyperplasia, meaning there is an increase in cell number or in the number of cell layers. But this second category also includes atypia or atypical cells. So this means that in addition to having too many cells, the cells look odd. They are disorganized. In previous videos, you learned that there are two terms that can mean disorganized. One is atypical hyperplasia. The other is dysplasia. And they differ in terms of the degree of disorganization. Atypical hyperplasia is less disorganized. So that's one. That one is here. Dysplasia is more disorganized, and that's this entire row here. So this category of benign breast diseases consists of situations in which there are too many cells and the cells are also disorganized. So let's put a label here of proliferative with atypia for that row, and the same label here in the dysplasia row. But these are all still benign. Their degree of disorganization is not extreme enough to qualify them as malignant or cancerous. This category of breast diseases that are proliferative with atypia includes two entities: hyperplasia of the breast lobules with atypia and hyperplasia of the breast ducts with atypia. So they differ only in the location of the hyperplasia with atypia. Hyperplasia in the lobules with atypia is going to be here. Hyperplasia in the ducts with atypia is going to be here in the stalk. So the first entity in this category is atypical lobular hyperplasia, and it's precisely what its name implies. Atypical lobular hyperplasia is proliferation and disorganization of the cells in the lobules of your breast. So it's the cells in this part of your breast that increase in number and become disorganized. The second entity in this category is, what do you know, atypical ductal hyperplasia. And it also means precisely what its name implies. Atypical ductal hyperplasia is proliferation and disorganization of the cells in the ducts of your breast. So that's this part of your breast where the cells increase in number and become disorganized. In the uterine cancer in general, you learn that there are different degrees of dysplasia. That's why I have mild, moderate, and severe here on our board for the dysplasia row. And you have the very same thing with regard to these atypical breast hyperplasias. When you think about it, combining the words atypical plus hyperplasia gives you dysplasia. Isn't it it grand how some principles just keep coming up over and over again with each cancer we discuss? This is why I gave you a unit on cancer in general before launching into the units on endometrial uterine cancer, cervical cancer, or breast cancer. You have to have a foundation. In those units, you discovered that hyperplasia, atypia, and dysplasia were not cancers in and of themselves. They were benign. Instead of being cancers, they were cellular changes that have the potential to become cancer. But they also have the potential for never getting any worse than they already are. And now you see that these same cellular changes in your breasts are benign breast diseases. Okay, our third and final category of benign breast diseases is something called in situ disease. As I indicated earlier in this video, in situ means local or in its original location. With regard to your breasts, in situ disease can develop in the lobules of your breasts or in the ducts of your breast. If it develops here, in the lobules, it's called lobular disease in situ. If it develops here in the ducts, it's called ductal disease in situ. So I'll add that label to our board. We have that here, in situ disease. We're just going to put the label itself up. Now I know this in situ terminology is something with which you are probably somewhat familiar. And that's because it's one of the most commonly diagnosed entities in breasts these days. But there is a lot more to it than you can possibly imagine. So much more to it. And I'm going to spend a whole lot of time in this unit making sure you understand it fully. For now, I just want you to be crystal clear about the fact that it is a benign breast disease. I'm going to bet that you got the quiz question wrong because you assumed that lobular carcinoma in situ, option F, was not benign. Here's the quiz question again with the answer in bold. And the reason you probably got it wrong and assumed that it was not benign is because it has the word carcinoma in its name. Well, you are not alone. This is something that is a pitfall for doctors and patients alike. But I promise I will be explaining it in great detail in upcoming videos. For now, just rest a bit with the notion that in situ disease is a benign breast disease. It's not malignant and it's not cancer. And the very reason it is neither malignant nor cancer is precisely because it is in its original location. So stay tuned for much more on this. For now, the lowermost portion of our chart is somewhat bare. That's intentional, but it will not stay that way. As usual, I made you a chart of this information, and it will help you keep this information straight. The chart is simple. Across the top row, you see the three categories of benign breast diseases. Proliferative diseases without atypia, proliferative diseases with atypia, and in situ diseases. In the first column, I've designated 3 locations. Any location, lobular, and ductal. And then I just put the names of the diseases we mentioned today in their appropriate column based on location. So the diseases that can occur in any part of your breast are in yellow. The lobular entities are in green, and the ductal entities are in orange. As usual, you can find this chart via the link in the description box, or you can go to menopausetailor.me where you'll find all my charts. So this is where we'll stop today. So here's your summary. Benign breast diseases fall into 3 categories. Proliferative diseases without atypia, proliferative diseases with atypia, and in situ diseases. They all involve entities having an increase in the number of cells that are normal without atypia or disorganized with atypia. In situ lesions are entities that are localized and have not spread. What makes all of these benign breast diseases is the fact that they do not contain malignant cells that spread or invade surrounding tissues. And next week, we'll address some of the terminology that has made breast cancer so darn confusing. Until then, go to menopausetailor.me to schedule a consultation. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and Stories. Subscribe to my channel and my newsletter. Bye!